In the chaos and thunder of war, there are stories that sound impossible, stories that make you wonder if they are real or made up. But this story is true, and it is one of the most amazing stories from World War II. Imagine a young man, just 23 years old, standing on black sand beaches while bullets fly all around him. He holds a weapon that should not exist, a gun built from pieces of a crashed airplane. The Japanese soldiers cannot believe what they see. They watch as this young Marine tears through their defenses like a storm, killing 20 of their best fighters in a single day. His comrades call him crazy. His commanders do not know if they should punish him or praise him. But by the end of that bloody day, everyone knows his name. This is the story of Tony Stein, a tool maker from Ohio who turned scraps of metal into a killing machine and changed the course of one of the bloodiest battles in Marine Corps history. This is the story of courage, skill, and the kind of bravery that earns the highest honor a nation can give. Tony Stein was born on September 30th in 1921 in Dayton, Ohio. His parents, Steve and Rose Stein, came to America from a small village called Erdevik in Austria-Hungary, which is now part of Serbia. They left their homeland to escape the prejudice and hatred that was growing in Europe at that time. Like many immigrants, they came to America searching for a better life, for freedom, and for safety. Steve Stein, who used to be called Istvan back in the old country, worked hard to provide for his family. Rose took care of the home and raised her children with strong values. Tony grew up with two sisters named Teresa and Mary Louise. The family lived in North Dayton, a working-class neighborhood where immigrant families helped each other survive and build new lives in a new land. From the time he was very young, Tony showed a different spirit than other kids. He was tough and fearless. The streets of North Dayton were his playground, and he learned early how to be strong and how to stand up for himself. He was not a quiet boy who stayed inside reading books. He loved sports and played them whenever he could. Athletics came naturally to him, especially the rough and physical games that required courage and strength. His friends remember him as someone who never backed down from a challenge, who never showed fear, even when maybe he should have. This fearless nature would serve him well later in life, but as a young boy, it sometimes got him into trouble. He was a daredevil, always looking for the next adventure, always pushing the limits of what was safe or smart. School did not hold much interest for Tony Stein. He attended Keyser High School in Dayton, but his mind was not on books and classrooms. He wanted to do things with his hands, to build and create and fix things. The regular school lessons felt boring and pointless to him. He could not see how sitting in a classroom would help him in the real world. So Tony made a decision that would shape the rest of his life. He dropped out of high school before graduating. His teachers probably shook their heads and worried about his future, but Tony had a plan. He got a job at a machine shop at Dayton-Patterson Field. This was where he truly came alive. Working with metal and machines felt natural to Tony. He discovered he had a gift for understanding how things worked and how to make them better. He learned to operate different tools and machines. He studied how parts fit together and how to shape raw metal into useful objects. His hands became skilled and sure. He could look at a piece of machinery and understand it in ways that took other people years to learn. The other workers at the shop noticed his talent. This young man who could not sit still in a classroom could focus for hours on a complex mechanical problem. He loved figuring things out, loved making things work. He became a tool maker, a craftsman who could create the very tools that other people used to build things. This was not just a job for Tony, it was his calling. He did not know it yet, but these skills he was learning would one day save lives and make him a hero. While Tony worked in his machine shop in Ohio, The world around him was changing. War had broken out in Europe in 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. Japan was also expanding its empire in Asia, attacking China and threatening other countries. At first, America tried to stay out of the fighting. Many Americans believed the wars in Europe and Asia were not their problem. But everything changed on December 7, 1941. That Sunday morning, Japanese planes attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. They destroyed ships and planes and killed thousands of American sailors and soldiers. The next day, America declared war on Japan. Soon after, America was also fighting Germany and Italy. The whole world was at war. Young men across America lined up to enlist in the military. They wanted to defend their country and fight back against the enemies who had attacked them. Tony Stein was 20 years old when Pearl Harbor happened. He could have stayed in Ohio and worked in the factories that were making war supplies. That would have been an important job too. But Tony wanted to fight. He wanted to be in the middle of the action, not safe at home while other men risked their lives. On September 22, 1942, Tony walked into a recruiting office and enlisted in the United States Marine Corps Reserve. He specifically chose the Marines because he knew they were always the first ones sent into battle. He knew they fought the hardest and most dangerous fights. That did not scare Tony. That was exactly what he wanted. He wanted to defend his country, to prove himself, and to face the enemy head-on. The Marine Corps training was brutal and demanding. It was designed to break weak men and forge strong ones into warriors. But Tony thrived in this environment. The physical challenges did not bother him. He was tough and strong from growing up on the streets of Dayton and from years of physical work in the machine shop. The mental pressure did not break him either. He had the kind of stubborn courage that refused to give up no matter what. His instructors saw something special in this young man from Ohio. He had the heart of a fighter and the hands of a craftsman. That was a rare combination. Tony became a member of the elite Paramarines, a special unit of Marines trained to parachute into combat. This was one of the toughest and most dangerous jobs in the entire Marine Corps. Only the best and bravest men made it into the Paramarines. Tony proved he belonged among them. He was assigned to Headquarters Company, 3rd Parachute Battalion, 1st Parachute Regiment, 3rd Marine Division. These units had long names, but they represented some of the finest fighting men in the American military. Tony trained hard and learned fast. He mastered weapons and tactics. He learned how to survive in combat and how to kill the enemy efficiently. But he also brought his own special skills to the unit. His experience as a toolmaker meant that he understood weapons better than most soldiers. He could fix guns that other Marines thought were broken. He could modify equipment to work better in the field. His commanders noticed this talent and appreciated it. In 1943 and 1944, Tony Stein saw combat for the first time in the Pacific Islands. His unit fought in the land battle of Vella La Vella and the Bougainville campaign. These were brutal jungle fights against Japanese soldiers who defended every inch of ground with fanatic determination. The Pacific War was different from the war in Europe. The islands were covered in thick jungle where you could not see more than a few feet ahead. The heat and humidity were almost unbearable. Diseases like malaria killed as many men as bullets did. The Japanese soldiers were tough and skilled. They built hidden fortifications and set deadly ambushes. They believed surrender was shameful, so they fought to the death. Tony proved himself in these early battles. During the Bougainville campaign, he showed incredible skill as a marksman and fighter. One day he shot 5 Japanese snipers who were hiding in trees and shooting at his fellow Marines. 5 kills in a single day was an amazing achievement. Snipers were some of the most dangerous enemies because they could pick off soldiers from hiding places that were almost impossible to spot. but Tony had sharp eyes and steady nerves. He could spot the snipers and take them down before they killed any more Marines. His comrades began to see him as someone special, someone who could be counted on when things got desperate. But Tony also saw something during these campaigns that bothered him. The weapons his unit had were good, but they were not good enough. The machine guns were too heavy and too slow. In the thick jungle fighting, Marines needed weapons that could deliver massive firepower quickly and could be carried easily. Tony started thinking about this problem. His toolmaker mind began working on solutions. It was during these Pacific campaigns that Tony and other Marines discovered something interesting. American aircraft that crashed or were damaged often had machine guns that could be salvaged. These were AN-2 Browning machine guns, designed to be mounted on fighter planes and bombers. These aircraft guns had an incredible rate of fire, much faster than any infantry weapon. They could fire between 1,200 and 1,400 rounds per minute. That was an amazing amount of firepower. But there was a problem. These guns were designed to be mounted on aircraft, not carried by soldiers. They had awkward spade grips instead of normal triggers. They were heavy and difficult to handle. They needed to be fed ammunition by a complex system. They were simply not practical for infantry use. But some creative Marines started experimenting. A soldier named Bill Colby was one of the first. During the Bougainville campaign, he simply attached a bipod to the front of an aircraft machine gun. This made it possible to set the gun down and fire it, even though it still had the awkward spade grips. When Japanese soldiers ambushed him, Colby deployed his modified gun and drove them back with devastating firepower. This proved the concept could work, but the design needed improvement. That is where two Marines named Milan Grevich and John Lytle came in. Sergeant Mel Grevich was a creative thinker like Tony. After the Para-Marines were disbanded in 1944, Grevich was assigned to G Company of the 28th Marine Regiment in the 5th Marine Division. He was disappointed with the standard machine guns his unit had. He remembered the modified aircraft gun concept and decided to perfect it. Working with Private First Class John Lytle, Grevich created an improved version. They took the stock from an M1 Garand rifle and attached it to the aircraft gun, giving it a proper shoulder rest. They used the bipod and rear sights from a Browning automatic rifle. Most importantly, they designed a solenoid trigger mechanism to replace the spade grips. This made the weapon fire like a normal gun. They called their creation the Stinger because its incredibly high rate of fire had quite the sting. The Stinger was 25 pounds, which was light enough for one man to carry. It fired the same .30 caliber ammunition as other American weapons. It had an effective range of 1,500 yards, but what made it special was that incredible rate of fire. It could put out more bullets per minute than almost any other infantry weapon in the world. Grevich and Lytle built 6 Stingers in total. This was not official work approved by the military command. It was done in improvised workshops using salvaged parts and creativity. They worked on these weapons in secret because technically they were not authorized. The military didn't like soldiers creating their own weapons. There were rules and procedures. But the Marines who were going to fight knew that following all the rules might get them killed. They needed every advantage they could get. When the 6 Stingers were finished, Grevich distributed them to the men he trusted most. 3 went to the rifle platoons of G Company of the 28th Marine Regiment. 1 went to the company's demolition section. Grevich kept 1 for himself. And the 6th Stinger went to Corporal Tony Stein of A Company, 28th Marines. Why did Tony get one of these precious weapons? Because Grevich knew about Tony's background as a toolmaker. He knew he would understand the weapon and could maintain it and use it properly. Tony took the Stinger and studied it carefully. His trained eyes examined every part. He understood exactly how it worked and what it could do. He tested it and practiced with it. He learned how to control its incredible rate of fire. He learned how to change the ammunition belts quickly. He learned how to clear jams and keep it functioning. The Stinger became an extension of Tony himself. He customized it and adjusted it until it fit him perfectly. He gave it his own nickname and treated it like a trusted companion. He knew this weapon could make a difference in battle. He also knew it gave him responsibilities. The Stinger was so powerful and fired so fast that it burned through ammunition incredibly quickly. That meant he would need help keeping it supplied with bullets during a fight. In late 1944 and early 1945, the American military was closing in on Japan. After years of brutal island-hopping campaigns, American forces were getting closer and closer to the Japanese home islands. But there was one small island that the Americans needed to capture. It was called Iwo Jima, and it sat right between the Mariana Islands, where American bombers were based, and Japan itself. Japanese fighters based on Iwo Jima could attack American bombers flying to Japan. If America controlled Iwo Jima, their damaged bombers would have a place to land on the way back from missions over Japan. The island was only 8 square miles of volcanic rock and ash, but it was incredibly important strategically. The problem was that Iwo Jima was also one of the most heavily defended places in the entire Pacific. The Japanese knew the Americans would come for it. They had more than 20,000 troops dug into the volcanic rock. They had hundreds of pillboxes, bunkers, and underground tunnels. They had machine guns and artillery positioned to cover every inch of the beaches. The Japanese commander, General Tadamichi Kurobayashi, was a brilliant tactician. He told his men they would not banzai charge and die gloriously. Instead, they would stay hidden in their fortifications and kill as many Americans as possible before they died. He prepared his defenses for months. He created a fortress island where every rock and cave could hide death. The American commanders knew this would be a terrible battle. They planned for massive casualties. They organized the largest amphibious assault force ever assembled in the Pacific. More than 450 ships gathered for the invasion. The Marines of the 5th Division, including Tony Stein and his comrades in the 28th Regiment, trained hard. They knew they would be among the first to hit the beaches. They knew many of them would die. On the ships sailing toward Iwo Jima, Tony checked and rechecked his Stinger. He made sure he had plenty of ammunition belts. He said his prayers and wrote letters home. He tried not to think too much about what was coming. No amount of training could truly prepare anyone for what they were about to face. The morning of February 19, 1945, arrived with almost perfect weather. The sea was calm. The sky was clear. It was a beautiful day which seemed wrong for what was about to happen. At 6:45 in the morning, the naval bombardment began. American battleships, cruisers, and destroyers opened fire on Iwo Jima. The sound was like continuous thunder. The shells screamed through the air and exploded on the island. Smoke and dust rose into the sky. American planes dropped bombs. For hours, the bombardment continued. The Marines waiting in the landing craft below deck could feel the ship shake with each shot. Surely nothing could survive such punishment. Surely the Japanese defenses would be destroyed. But the Marines who had fought on other Pacific islands knew better. The Japanese were masters at building fortifications that could survive bombing. They would be waiting. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the first wave of Marines climbed into their landing craft. The boats circled in the water, then formed up in lines and headed toward the beach. Tony Stein was in one of those boats. He held his Stinger tightly. The landing craft moved through the water toward the black volcanic sand beaches of Iwo Jima. The noise was incredible. Boat engines roared. Shells still screamed overhead. The radio crackled with orders and reports. The Marines in the boats tried to control their fear. Some prayed, some talked nervously, some sat in silence. Everyone knew that in a few minutes they would either be alive or dead. The landing craft hit the beach and the ramps dropped. This was the moment of truth. The Marines charged out onto the black sand. At first, it was quiet. Too quiet. Where was the enemy fire? Had the bombardment worked? The Marines ran up the beach. The volcanic sand was soft and deep. Running was hard. Climbing the terraces that rose from the beach was even harder. The sand kept sliding under their boots. And then all hell broke loose. The Japanese had been waiting, hiding in their bunkers and pillboxes. When enough Marines were on the beach, they opened fire all at once. Machine guns chattered from hidden positions. Mortars exploded among the packed landing craft and the Marines struggling through the sand. Artillery shells landed everywhere. The beach became a nightmare of explosions, screams, and death. Tony Stein hit the beach and immediately took cover. He set up his Stinger on its bipod and looked for targets. Japanese machine gun nests were firing from concrete pillboxes up the terraces. Marines were being cut down all around him. His platoon was pinned down, unable to move forward without being killed. This was the moment the Stinger was made for. Tony stood up, fully exposing himself to enemy fire. This was insane. Everyone else was trying to hide, and Tony was standing up. But he had a reason. He needed to draw the enemy's fire so he could see where they were shooting from. Bullets kicked up sand around him. A mortar shell exploded nearby. But Tony stood steady, watching. There, he saw the muzzle flashes from a pillbox. He aimed his Stinger and pulled the trigger. The gun roared to life with an incredible sound. 1,200 rounds per minute poured from the Stinger. The noise was different from any other weapon on the battlefield. It was faster, more intense. The stream of bullets tore into the Japanese pillbox. Concrete chips flew. The enemy machine gun went silent. Tony shifted his aim to another pillbox and fired again. The Stinger's incredible rate of fire meant he could suppress multiple enemy positions quickly. His comrades watched in amazement. They had never seen anything like this. Tony moved forward, charging the pillboxes one by one. He would fire a burst, advance, fire again, advance. The Japanese soldiers could not believe what they were seeing. One Marine with some kind of special weapon was attacking them alone. Tony killed 20 Japanese soldiers that day in single-handed assaults. 20 confirmed kills in one of the most heavily defended positions in the world. But the Stinger had one major problem. It fired so fast that it burned through ammunition incredibly quickly. Tony would empty a 100-round belt in just seconds. He ran out of ammunition again and again. So he did something that became legendary. He took off his helmet because it was heavy and slowed him down. He kicked off his boots because he could run faster barefoot on the volcanic sand. Then he ran back to the beach to get more ammunition. Running back to the beach meant running through the same deadly fire that was killing Marines all around him. The Japanese never stopped shooting. Mortar shells kept falling. Machine gun bullets cut through the air. Snipers looked for targets. But Tony ran through it all. He was fast and he was determined. He reached the beach where supplies were being unloaded. He grabbed more ammunition belts for his Stinger. Then he looked around and saw wounded Marines lying on the sand, unable to make it to the boats that would take them to the hospital ships. Tony could have just grabbed his ammunition and run back to the fight. Nobody would have blamed him, but that was not who Tony Stein was. He helped a wounded Marine to his feet and half carried, half dragged him back to the beach and the waiting boats. Then Tony ran back up to the fight with his fresh ammunition. He found his position and continued attacking enemy pillboxes. And then he ran out of ammunition again. So he did it again. He stripped off his gear and ran back through the killing zone to get more ammunition and save another wounded man. Over and over, 8 times in total, Tony made this run. 8 times he risked his life not just for ammunition, but to save his fellow Marines. The wounded men he helped would have died on that beach if Tony had not come for them. They owed their lives to his courage and his refusal to leave anyone behind. As the day went on, the Japanese focused their fire on the Marine with the strange weapon.
They recognized that Tony and his stinger were causing them serious problems. Bullets flew at him constantly. Twice that day, enemy fire struck the stinger itself and knocked it right out of Tony's hands. The first time, he picked it up, checked it quickly, and kept fighting. His toolmaker skills let him assess the damage instantly. The gun was still functional. The second time it was hit, the damage was worse. Another Marine might have grabbed a regular rifle and kept fighting, but Tony could not give up on his stinger. Under fire, he performed field repairs, fixing the weapon well enough to keep using it. His hands worked quickly and surely, even with bullets flying around him and explosions shaking the ground. Later in the day, when his platoon needed to withdraw to a safer position, Tony personally covered their retreat. He set up the stinger and fired burst after burst at the enemy, keeping them pinned down so his comrades could move back safely. He also directed the fire of a half-track vehicle, an armored vehicle with a mounted gun. He pointed out stubborn enemy pillboxes to the half-track and coordinated their fire until the Japanese fortifications were destroyed. Tony was everywhere that day, doing everything. Fighting, running for ammunition, saving wounded men, repairing his weapon, directing fire support. He seemed to be in 10 places at once. His energy never flagged, his courage never wavered.
When night finally fell on that first terrible day of the Battle of Iwo Jima, the Marines dug in and tried to count their losses. It had been one of the bloodiest days in Marine Corps history. Hundreds of men were dead. Thousands were wounded. The black sand was soaked with blood. But they had gained a foothold on the island. They had broken through some of the Japanese defenses. They would be able to continue the attack the next day. And many Marines were alive because of Tony Stein and his stinger. The men he had rescued from the beach told everyone what he had done. The Marines who had watched him charge pillboxes alone spread the story. Tony became famous in the division overnight. Everyone knew about the crazy corporal with the aircraft machine gun. But Tony did not think he had done anything special. He was just doing his job, doing what needed to be done. He cleaned his stinger carefully that night. He checked every part and made sure it would work the next day. He wrote a quick letter home, not mentioning the danger or what he had done. He tried to rest because he knew the next day would bring more fighting. Over the following days and weeks, the battle for Iwo Jima continued. The Marines pushed inland slowly, yard by bloody yard. The Japanese fought from their underground positions with fanatic determination. The 28th Marines had the mission of capturing Mount Suribachi, the extinct volcano at the south end of the island. Tony fought in this battle too, using his stinger to help clear enemy positions. On February 23, 1945, Marines of the 28th Regiment reached the top of Mount Suribachi. They raised an American flag on the summit. Later that day, they raised a larger flag, and a photographer named Joe Rosenthal captured the image. That photograph became one of the most famous pictures of World War II, a symbol of American courage and sacrifice. Tony Stein was part of the unit that made that flag raising possible. His actions on the first day had helped the Marines establish the foothold they needed to advance on Suribachi. But Tony was wounded during the fight for the volcano. He took enemy fire and was injured seriously enough that he had to be evacuated to a hospital ship offshore. On the hospital ship, doctors treated Tony's wounds. They told him he was going home. He had done his part. He had earned a rest. He could recover and let other men finish the fight. But Tony heard news that bothered him deeply. His regiment, the 28th Marines, had been sent to capture a heavily defended position called Hill 362A. The fighting there was terrible. The Marines were taking heavy casualties. Men Tony knew, friends he had fought beside, were dying. Tony could not stay on the hospital ship, knowing his brothers were in trouble. Against medical advice, against orders,
Tony left the hospital ship. He found a way back to Iwo Jima and returned to his unit. His commanders were amazed to see him. They tried to send him back, but Tony refused. He was not going to sit safely on a ship while his comrades died. He was a Marine, and Marines did not abandon each other. March 1st, 1945, started like every other day on Iwo Jima. The fighting continued. The Japanese defenders still had not surrendered. They continued to fight from hidden positions, making the Marines pay in blood for every yard of ground. A company of the 28th Marines was pinned down by a Japanese machine gun emplacement. They could not move forward without being cut to pieces. They needed someone to scout ahead and find out exactly where the enemy position was and how it was defended. Corporal Tony Stein volunteered to lead a 19-man patrol to reconnoiter the enemy position. This was a dangerous mission. They would have to move through ground the enemy could see and shoot, but someone had to do it, and Tony never asked other men to do dangerous things he would not do himself. Tony led his patrol forward carefully. They moved from cover to cover, trying to stay hidden. Tony's eyes searched the rocks and caves ahead, looking for the enemy machine gun nest. Somewhere in those volcanic rocks, a Japanese sniper was also searching. The sniper was well hidden, invisible. He had probably been waiting for hours or even days for the right target. He saw Tony moving at the head of the patrol. The sniper took careful aim. The crack of a single rifle shot echoed across the volcanic landscape. Tony Stein fell. The bullet struck him and killed him almost instantly. He was 23 years old. He had survived the most dangerous imaginable combat on the first day of the invasion. He had charged machine gun nests alone. He had run through hellfire 8 times. His weapon had been shot out of his hands twice. He had been wounded seriously enough to be evacuated to a hospital ship offshore. And after all that, after everything, a single sniper's bullet ended his life. Tony Stein's body was buried in the 5th Marine Division Cemetery on Iwo Jima with military honors. His comrades mourned him. They knew they had lost someone special, someone who had saved many of their lives. The officers who had witnessed Tony's actions on February 19th wrote up recommendations for medals. They described what he had done in careful detail. As these reports moved up through the chain of command, officers read them with amazement. Tony's actions were not just brave, they were extraordinary. They met the highest standard for courage under fire. The recommendation went all the way to the President of the United States. On February 19, 1946, exactly a year after Tony charged the beaches of Iwo Jima, his widow received his Medal of Honor. This is the highest military decoration the United States can award. It is given only for actions that go far above and beyond the call of duty, for courage at the risk of one's own life above and beyond what can be expected. The ceremony took place in the office of Ohio Governor Frank Lausch. Tony's Medal of Honor citation described how he was the first man of his unit to be on station after hitting the beach. It described how he stood upright and exposed himself to enemy fire to locate their positions. It described how he boldly charged enemy pillboxes one by one and succeeded in killing 20 of the enemy. It described his 8 trips back to the beach for ammunition while helping wounded men each time. It described how his weapon was shot from his hands, but he kept fighting. President Truman signed the citation. Tony Stein joined the ranks of America's greatest heroes. After the war ended, the process began of bringing fallen soldiers home from the places where they died. Tony's family in Dayton wanted him buried in his hometown, not on a distant volcanic island in the Pacific. In 1948, Tony's remains were exhumed from the Iwo Jima cemetery and transported back to the United States. On December 17, 1948, Funeral services were held at Our Lady of the Rosary Church in Dayton. The church was packed with people who came to honor Tony. His family was there, his mother Rose and father Steve, his sisters Teresa and Mary Louise. Fellow Marines who had served with him came to pay their respects. Veterans who had heard the stories of Tony's courage came to honor him. Citizens of Dayton came to see their hometown hero laid to rest. The funeral was conducted with full military honors. A Marine honor guard carried Tony's flag-draped coffin. A bugler played taps, the haunting melody that honors fallen soldiers. Marines fired a rifle salute. People cried openly. They cried for Tony's lost potential, for all the years he would never have, for the wife and children he would never know. They cried for all the young men who had given their lives in the war. But they also felt pride. Tony had represented the best of his generation, the best of America. He had faced the worst imaginable conditions and had shown incredible courage. He had saved lives and had helped win a crucial battle. He was buried in Calvary Cemetery in Dayton. His grave marker identifies him as Corporal Anthony Michael Stein, United States Marine Corps, Medal of Honor recipient. After the Battle of Iwo Jima ended, the 6 Stinger weapons that had been built by Mel Grevich and John Little faced an uncertain fate. The United States military did not like keeping non-standard equipment. These weapons had never been officially approved or authorized. They were improvised modifications created in field workshops without proper paperwork or testing. So after the war, most or all of the Stingers were probably destroyed. The military wanted standardization. They wanted all soldiers to have the same approved weapons so that training, ammunition supply, and maintenance would be simpler. There was no room in that system for 6 unique handmade guns. Today, none of the original 6 Stingers are known to exist. They have been lost to history, probably melted down for scrap metal or destroyed as surplus equipment. This is a sad fact because those weapons were pieces of history, artifacts of American ingenuity and courage. But even though the physical weapons are gone, the story of the Stinger lives on. Military historians tell the story to new generations of soldiers and Marines. The Stinger represents the American spirit of innovation, the willingness to break rules when necessary to accomplish the mission. It represents the courage and creativity of the Marines who fought in the Pacific. Several replicas of the Stinger have been built in recent years. These replicas help people understand what the weapon looked like and how it worked. One replica was built for a television show about military weapons. Another was built for the movie Flags of Our Fathers, though the scene using it was cut from the final film. The story of Tony Stein and the Stinger teaches several important lessons. The first lesson is about courage. True courage is not the absence of fear. Everyone on those landing craft approaching Iwo Jima was afraid. Fear is a natural human response to danger. True courage is facing that fear and doing what is needed to be done anyway. Tony was surely afraid on that beach, but he did not let fear control him. He stood up when others were hiding. He ran through enemy fire when he could have stayed in cover. He charged machine gun nests that other men would never have approached. That is courage, and it cannot be taught. It comes from somewhere deep inside a person. The second lesson is about innovation and creativity. The Stinger was not some brilliant invention created in a laboratory by engineers with degrees. It was built by regular Marines using salvaged parts and improvised tools. Mel Grevich and John Little saw a problem, the lack of adequate portable firepower, and they solved it with the materials they had available. Tony understood the weapon because of his background as a toolmaker. He could maintain it and use it effectively. This shows that sometimes the best solutions come from the people actually doing the work, not from distant commanders or planners. Sometimes you have to break the rules and try something new to get the job done. The third lesson is about duty and sacrifice. Tony could have stayed safe on the hospital ship after being wounded. Nobody would have blamed him. He had already done more than enough. But he heard his comrades were in trouble and he went back. He put their needs above his own safety. That is what duty means. It means doing what is right even when it is hard or dangerous. And Tony made the ultimate sacrifice. He gave his life for his country and his fellow Marines. That sacrifice can never be repaid. All we can do is remember him and honor him and try to live up to the example he set. Tony Stein has been honored in various ways since his death. A United States Navy ship, the USS Stein, was a Knox-class frigate commissioned in 1972 and named in Tony's honor. This ship served in the Navy for many years, carrying Tony's name across the world's oceans. In 1989, the Marine Corps dedicated the Moving Target Simulator building at Camp Pendleton in California in Tony's memory. This building is in the area where the 3rd Low-Altitude Air Defense Battalion operates. New generations of Marines train in a building named for a hero of Iwo Jima. In Dayton, Ohio, Tony is remembered as the city's only World War II Medal of Honor recipient. Local historians tell his story. Veterans groups honor him on Memorial Day and Veterans Day. His grave in Calvary Cemetery is visited by people who want to pay their respects to a true American hero. But perhaps the most important way Tony is remembered is in the stories that Marines tell each other. In every Marine Corps unit, senior Marines tell the new Marines about the heroes who came before them. They tell them about John Basilone at Guadalcanal, about Smedley Butler in numerous battles, about Chesty Puller in Korea, and about Tony Stein at Iwo Jima. These stories are not just history lessons. They are examples of what it means to be a Marine. They show what courage looks like. They inspire young Marines to be brave and tough and selfless. Tony's story has that special quality that makes it memorable. The image of a young toolmaker from Ohio charging machine gun nests with a handmade weapon built from airplane parts is the kind of story that sounds like fiction but is true. It captures the imagination. It makes people think about what they would do in a similar situation.